In early 1917, after 300 years of Romanov rule, the Russian Empire decided to have a complete and total breakdown. It started with protests over bread shortages in Petrograd because running out of food during a catastrophic world war tends to upset people. The soldiers ordered to suppress the riots took a look at the situation, looked at their officers, and collectively decided, nah. They joined the protests instead. Tsar Nicholas II, who was away at military headquarters playing commander, was informed his capital was gone and his dynasty was over via telegram. He abdicated his throne on a train in the middle of nowhere, effectively ending a millennium of monarchy with the stroke of a pen. Nobody had a plan for what came next. Absolutely no one. This is what historians call a power vacuum, and nature famously abhors those. Into this void stepped not one, but two competing bodies. Because why have a simple, functional government when you can have a political nightmare? In the right wing of the opulent Tauride palace, you had the Provisional Government. This was a collection of liberal politicians from the old Duma, Russia's toothless parliament. They were the designated adults in the room, the ones with official titles and international recognition. In the left wing of the very same building, you had the Petrograd Soviet of Workers' and Soldiers' Deputies. This was a chaotic, sprawling council of elected representatives from factories and military barracks. One government had legitimacy, but no power. The other had all the real power, but no official legitimacy. They were history's most dysfunctional roommates, trying to run the largest country on Earth from opposite ends of a hallway. The provisional government's main goal was to be respectable. They wanted to write a nice constitution, hold some elections, and turn Russia into something like France or Britain. A lovely idea, except it completely ignored the reality that the country was on fire. Their leader, Prince Lvov, was a well-meaning aristocrat who was about as prepared to handle a revolution as a goldfish is to climb a tree. Their biggest, most catastrophic decision was to keep Russia in World War I. To them, it was a matter of national honor and treaty obligations to the Allies. To the millions of soldiers starving in the trenches and the workers demanding peace, it was the single dumbest thing they could possibly do. They promised war until a victorious conclusion, which to a war-weary population sounded less like a policy and more like a threat. While the government was making grand pronouncements, the Petrograd Soviet was busy actually running things. Or rather, unrunning things. Their first major act was issuing Order Number 1. It sounds boring, but it was basically a stick of dynamite thrown into the military command structure. It stated that soldiers should obey their officers and the provisional government only if their orders did not contradict the orders of the Soviet. In every military unit, committees of enlisted men were now in charge. This effectively gave the Soviet a giant veto button on the entire Russian army. The government might be the head, but the Soviet controlled the nervous system, including the part that held all the guns. A government that cannot command its own army isn't really a government. It's a debate club with a fancy letterhead. Into this beautiful mess arrives one Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, better known as Lenin. The Germans, fighting Russia in the war, had the brilliant idea of finding the most radical Russian exile they could and shipping him home. They put him on a sealed train across Germany, hoping he'd be, in Winston Churchill's later words, a plague bacillus injected into the heart of Russia. They were not wrong. When Lenin arrived at Finland Station in Petrograd in April, he gave a speech that shocked everyone, including his own Bolshevik party. He basically said, Forget the provisional government and the war now, seize all the land and give all power to the Soviets. This was his famous April thesis. At the time, his fellow Bolsheviks thought he'd lost his mind in exile. They were still thinking in terms of a gradual bourgeois revolution. Lenin was playing a completely different game. The fragile truce of dual power first shattered in April. The provisional government's foreign minister, Pavel Milyukov, sent a note to the Allied powers. In it, he secretly assured them that, despite all the public talk about peace, Russia would fight on to achieve decisive victory and claim Constantinople from the Ottoman Empire, an old imperial dream. Someone leaked the note. The public was, to put it mildly, not pleased. Massive street demonstrations erupted, filled with soldiers and workers carrying banners that said, "Down with Milyukov" and "End the war." For the first time, the Soviets' power was flexed against the government directly. Milyukov and the war minister were forced to resign. The provisional government had been publicly humiliated, proving it couldn't survive without the Soviets' approval. By summer, the situation was even worse. The government launched a disastrous new military offensive that fell apart instantly. The frustration boiled over into the July days. This wasn't a planned revolution. It was a spontaneous, chaotic eruption of 500,000 soldiers, sailors, and workers onto the streets. They marched under Bolshevik slogans, chiefly, "All power to the Soviets." Here's the truly ironic part. They marched to the Tauride Palace to demand the Soviets take power, and the Soviet leaders came out and told them to go home. They didn't want the responsibility. The Bolsheviks, caught by surprise, half-heartedly tried to lead the uprising, which then fizzled out. The government cracked down hard. Trotsky was arrested, Bolshevik newspapers were smashed, and Lenin had to shave his signature beard and flee to Finland in disguise. For a moment, it looked like the Bolsheviks were completely finished. After the July Days fiasco, a new leader emerged for the provisional government, Alexander Kerensky. He was a charismatic lawyer, a moderate socialist who had a foot in both camps, a minister in the government, and a member of the Soviet Executive Committee. He saw himself as the man of the hour, the only person who could bridge the gap and save Russia from chaos. He loved dramatic speeches and striking heroic poses. To restore order in the army, he appointed a new supreme commander, a tough, no-nonsense general named Lev Kornilov. Kerensky wanted a strong general to discipline the troops and secure his government. He thought Kornilov would be his loyal enforcer. This assumption ranks high on the list of history's worst HR decisions. General Kornilov looked at the chaos in Petrograd and came to a simple conclusion. The problem wasn't just the Bolsheviks, it was the entire Soviet, and probably that theatrical lawyer Kerensky too. In late August, he decided to restore order by marching his most reliable troops on the capital to, in his words, hang the German spies headed by Lenin and disperse the Soviet. Whether he was actually launching a coup against Kerensky or if there was a massive miscommunication is something historians still argue about. But Kerensky certainly thought it was a coup. He panicked. He had just crushed the Bolsheviks, and now his own top general was coming to overthrow him. His government had no loyal troops left to defend the city. The strongman he appointed was about to kick his door down. In a moment of pure, undiluted desperation, Kerensky did the only thing he could. He asked the very people he'd thrown in jail a month earlier for help. He appealed to the Soviets and the Bolsheviks to defend the revolution against Kornilov. Not only did he appeal to them, he authorized the creation of a Red Guard militia and gave them thousands of rifles from the state's armories. So now the Bolsheviks, who had been defeated and disgraced, were suddenly re-legitimized as the saviors of Petrograd, and, even better, they were armed. The coup itself was a farce. Railway workers diverted Kornilov's trains. Soviet agitators, many of them Bolsheviks, met the soldiers and convinced them they were being tricked into crushing the revolution. Kornilov's army melted away without a single shot fired in anger. The results were catastrophic for Kerensky and glorious for Lenin. The Bolsheviks were heroes, the army command was discredited, and Kerensky was left looking like a fool who had to be saved by his worst enemies. The Kornilov affair was the death blow for dual power. There was now only one real power left. The provisional government was a ghost, utterly without authority or support. Kerensky was a leader with no one to lead. Meanwhile, the Bolsheviks' popularity skyrocketed. In September, they won majorities in both the Petrograd and Moscow Soviets for the first time. The soldiers, disgusted with their leadership, were radicalized. The peasants, tired of waiting for the government to act, were simply seizing land across the country. The slogan, "All power to the Soviets," was no longer a radical demand. It just described reality. From his hiding place in Finland, Lenin began bombarding his party's central committee with frantic letters. The time was now. The government was helpless. To wait would be idiocy and a crime. The 8-month experiment in dual power was over. It began with the impossible premise of two governments sharing a house, one with the keys to the front door and the other with the combination to the gun safe. Through a series of crises, miscalculations, and spectacular own goals by the provisional government, the situation had been clarified. All that was left was for one group to formally take what they already functionally had. The stage was perfectly set for the October Revolution. A nearly bloodless coup was about to change the entire course of the 20th century. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!